The disappointment in the star. Zarnik stood in the grand kitchen of the Galactic Culinary Board, surrounded by gleaming silver walls and machines that hummed with precision. He was one of the top chefs in the galaxy, a master of molecular taste, construction, a hero among food artists, yet he felt empty. As he stirred another bowl of luminous kelp broth from the moons of Geltrax, he looked around at the other chefs. Everyone focused, everyone perfect, but no one smiling, no one excited. Zarnik knew the truth, something was missing. Every day he prepared meals for galactic kings, for alien emperors, for beings made of pure gas and liquid metal. But their reactions were always the same, and not a blink, a ripple of energy, appreciation with no passion. He longed to see someone laugh while eating, to cry because of flavor, to fall in love with food again the way he once did, before the galaxy became too advanced, too clean, to perfect. Then, one day everything changed. A small cargo freighter docked at the outer station. Its manifest was filled with metals and plastics, and one sealed human ration container marked emergency food, do not open, unauthorized. Zarnik should have ignored it, but something about it called to him. He waited until night, when the kitchen lights dimmed and silence fell over the board, and then he crept into the storage bay with nothing but a scanner and a knife inside the ration box. He found strange items wrapped in plastic. Strange smells filled the air, sharp, spicy, smoky, and something sweet. He unwrapped one and found a sandwich, soft bread, golden and toasted, filled with fried meat, pickles, sauce, and something red. He had no idea what it was, but his hands moved. Without thinking, he lifted the sandwich to his mouth and took a bite. Time stopped. Zarnik felt fire on his tongue, ice on his throat, an explosion of textures and heat and salt and fat. His knees buckled, his arms trembled, his four hearts beat wildly in his chest. He fell to the floor, his eyes wide, his mouth hanging open. The taste was alive, it was chaos, it was emotion, it was war and peace. In one bite he gasped for air and took another bite and another, until it was gone, and he sat in the corner shaking. His assistant, Freck, found him an hour later, still holding the empty wrapper, eyes staring at nothing. When asked what happened, Zarnik whispered just one word: Earth. Next day he tried to cook, but everything tasted bland. He added more spices, more colors, more chemicals, but nothing worked, nothing compared to the sandwich he had tasted. Every dish was a failure. His confidence broke, his spirit dimmed. He went to the archives and searched for Earth. The humans were listed as a Tier 3 species, low technology, unstable governments, and dangerous environments, but the report mentioned their food culture in a single line: diverse, unpredictable, flavorful. That night Zarnik dreamed of rivers of sauce, waterfalls of melted cheese, trees with fruits of fire and smoke. He saw creatures called chefs with tattoos and fire in their eyes, who flipped meat on hot grills, who laughed, who cried, who loved food more than life itself. He woke up sweating and smiling for the first time in years. Walked into the boardroom of the Culinary High Council, his white robes flowing, his face stern and proud. He declared, "I resign." The council gasped. No one had ever left the board before. It was a lifetime honor. But Zarnik no longer cared about honor, he only cared about flavor, about truth, about Earth. He walked out of the boardroom, left his station, and packed nothing but a knife and a stolen map of human trade. Rutesh knew Earth was far. He knew it was dangerous. He knew he might never return, but he also knew that his life had no meaning without that taste, without that passion. He remembered the crunch of the bread, the burn of the spice, the whisper of the sauce, and he knew he had found his destiny. Climbed into an old scout shuttle barely held together with bolts and tape. He set the coordinates for Earth and hit launch. The stars stretched, the engines screamed, and the ship jumped into hyperspace. As the galaxies blurred outside the window, Zarnik sat back and whispered to himself, "If this is madness, let it be delicious." And with that, the alien chef who once ruled the stars began his journey to a small blue planet where flavor was born, where food had soul, and where his new life was waiting among the smells of smoke and spice and dreams. Flavor that broke a Specia. Zarnik's ship rattled as it pierced through asteroid belts and radiation storms. The old scout shuttle was never designed for long-distance travel, especially not to a primitive edge world like Earth, but he held the controls tight, his eyes focused on the blinking dot on the screen that showed the human homeworld. Every time the ship jolted, he reminded himself of that first bite, that magical flavor that opened his soul and showed him what food was truly meant to be. The journey took 13 standard cycles, during which Zarnik survived on nutrient paste that tasted like sand and sorrow. His body grew weak, but his resolve never faded. He stared at old videos of humans eating, laughing, crying, holding strange foods in their hands with names like burger, taco, pizza, donut, and curry. He memorized every ingredient, every preparation method, every sauce and seasoning. He studied their ancient traditions, from fire-roasted meats to modern fusion dishes, and something stirred deep inside him, a hunger not just of the stomach, but of purpose he began dreaming again. This time of a great table that stretched across the stars, humans and aliens seated side by side, passing dishes and breaking bread together. The stars above them sang in flavors unknown to science. It was more than a dream. It was a vision. When the ship finally reached Earth's orbit, it was almost out of power. Its engines wheezing, its lights dim, Zarnik initiated emergency landing protocol and aimed for the largest cluster of food signals he could detect. The scanner was overwhelmed by the density of street food emissions and unregulated cooking smoke, and the ship plummeted through Earth's atmosphere, a burning streak in the sky. He crash-landed in a place called Texas, right in the middle of something called a food truck festival. Humans screamed, scattered, took out their devices, and began recording. Instead of running away, Zarnik climbed out of the smoking wreck, coughing, covered in dust and wires and the scent of scorched metal. He looked around and smelled it. The air was filled with thousands of flavors: meat, grilling, spices floating in the wind, sweetness from fried desserts, tang from fermented sauces. It was heaven. The first thing he saw was a cart labeled tacos with a line of hungry people stretching around the block. He walked toward it, dazed, trembling, his legs barely working. He pointed at the food. The man behind the cart laughed, thought it was a costume, and handed him a plate. Zarnik took a bite of the taco, and time shattered again. His senses exploded. Flavor punched through every nerve. His skin glowed. His antennas stood straight. He fell to his knees and screamed, not in pain, but in joy. Every bite felt like a symphony of colors he never saw, like a language spoken directly to his soul. He ate and ate, and tears streamed down his alien cheeks. Humans around him clapped, thinking it was performance art. Someone handed him a soda. It fizzed and popped and tickled his throat. He laughed so hard he rolled on the ground and yelled, "I am home." The video of the alien losing his mind over tacos went viral in less than an hour. Scientists rushed to the scene. Military hovered in secret drones. Chefs ran with samples of food, hoping he would try theirs. News anchors debated whether it was first contact or first catering. And through it all, Zarnik kept eating. He tried hot dogs and corn dogs and burgers and ribs and things called donuts, which made him cry again, not out of sadness, but because they reminded him of a dream he once had as a child about sweet stars. Tried to speak, but his translator was broken, so he used his hands to point to his chest, then to the food, then to the sky, trying to say, "I came here for this, I left everything for this." Eventually a young chef named Melinda approached him with calm eyes and a bowl of mac and cheese. She smiled and said, "Slow down, taste this." Zarnik obeyed, and when the creamy golden noodles touched his tongue, he stood still and whispered a sound that meant love in his language. Melinda took him in, helped him rest, cleaned his wounds, and gave him more to eat. She didn't treat him like an alien. She treated him like a lost traveler. She asked him about where he came from and what he was searching for. He pointed at the food she made and simply said truth. At night, as they sat together under the stars, surrounded by the smell of grilled meats and sugary desserts, Zarnik made a decision. He would no longer return to the Galactic Culinary Board. He would stay on Earth, learn from its masters, and understand what made this planet's food so powerful. He knew it was more than ingredients. It was history, culture, survival, emotion. It was everything his world had forgotten in its pursuit of perfection. Opened a small notebook and began writing down everything he tasted, every spice, every technique, every feeling he had. When he ate, he didn't want to copy. He wanted to understand. He wanted to respect the art. He wanted to share it with the Galaxians somewhere deep in space. A signal from Earth reached the Galactic Culinary Board. A picture of Zarnik surrounded by food, smiling with his arms raised, and the words, "Earth is flavor. Earth is home." Crash landing in a world of fire and oil. Zarnik woke up to the sound of something hissing, the smell of oil and spices drifting through the air. It was early morning, and the sky above him was painted with soft blue and gold. The ground below him was warm concrete, and he lay beneath a red tent that flapped in the wind. The last memory he had was collapsing after tasting something called fried chicken. His mouth still tingled from the experience. As he sat up, he noticed people moving around, carrying boxes, setting up tables, lighting grills, and cleaning metal carts with fire-blazing machines. It was the beginning of a new day at the food truck festival, and no one was afraid of him anymore. The humans treated him like a guest, some like a celebrity, and others like a hungry friend. They handed him small bites as they passed him by: sliders, kebabs, rice bowls, juices, and icy things that melted on his tongue with flavors that danced like light beams across his senses. He was still trying to adjust to the emotions that each food triggered. Some dishes made him laugh suddenly, some pulled old feelings from deep within, memories of childhood under the yellow suns of his home planet. Some made him close his eyes and breathe slowly, trying to hold the moment forever. It was more than taste. It was storytelling. It was connection. It was raw, honest truth, inedible for Melinda, the young chef. who first gave him mac and cheese, returned, with fresh clothes, shoes, and a small translator device designed by her brother, who worked at a tech lab. She placed it around Zarnik's neck and waited patiently for it to sink. His voice crackled as he tried speaking again, this time with real words. "Thank you," he said softly, then paused, then added, "I want to learn everything." Melindad smiled and told him he would need to start by learning how humans cook, not with machines or molecules, but with heat, instinct, love, and sometimes chaos. She took him to her food truck, which was called the Fire Spoon, a small red cart with a wooden counter and a grill that smoked like a dragon's mouth. She handed him an apron and placed a raw burger patty in his hands. "This is ground beef," she said gently. "Now shape it with your hands and feel it. Listen to what it tells you." Zarnik stared at the meat, confused. His world had machines to do this, but here he was expected to connect with the ingredients, to use his hands, not his mind. He pressed the beef, slowly forming a patty as Melinda instructed him, then placed it on the hot grill. The sizzle that followed was unlike any sound he had heard. It was alive, it was exciting, and when the scent hit his nose, he nearly cried again. Within an hour, he had flipped patties, chopped onions, stirred sauces, and accidentally burned a slice of bread. Melinda laughed and told him that mistakes were part of the magic. Humans respected failure because it led to flavor. He looked around and saw dozens of other chefs doing the same, experimenting, improvising, trusting their instincts. They weren't following rules, they were following feeling. News had spread quickly about the alien chef who landed at a festival. Within hours, the mayor of the town arrived, followed by local news stations and curious onlookers. Some were skeptical, some were excited, but most were just hungry. Zarnik gave interviews through the translator, and when asked why he came, he replied, "I was dying from flavorless food. I tasted something from Earth and it woke me up." Was invited to try more local dishes: gumbo, deep dish pizza, sushi, corn dogs, funnel cake, faux jerk, chicken tamales, and pancakes with syrup. Each meal another explosion, each flavor a new chapter in his journey. He took notes, recorded reactions, collected spices and herbs, and asked questions no one expected an alien to ask, like, "How does this food make your heart feel?" or "What memory does this taste bring to you?" Zarnik began to understand that food was more than survival on Earth. It was family, it was culture, it was rebellion and pride, and dreams mixed into bites and chews and sauces. It was everything he had missed for years while working under sterile lights in a palace of flavorless perfection. One evening, a group of traveling chefs invited him to a barbecue in the countryside. They cooked over open flame under the stars, using wood, smoke, and meat and stories as their tools. He joined them, and for the first time in many years, he cooked not for fame or for stars or for money, but for the joy of it. He prepared a dish inspired by both Earth and his homeworld: a grilled steak marinated in blue citrus spice from his planet, served with mashed potatoes and fried kale chips, seasoned with garlic and salt. Humans cheered. The dish was strange, but comforting, new but familiar. And Zarnik stood by the fire as the sky turned dark and said out loud, "I do not wish to return home. I wish to stay here among the fire, the smoke, and the stories." That night he made a decision that would change not only his life, but the course of culinary history in the galaxy. He would open a restaurant on Earth, one that would mix the best of human flavor with the forgotten instincts of alien taste. It would be called Starfire Kitchen, and it would become the heart of something much bigger than cooking from alien chef to Earth's culinary god. Starfire Kitchen opened its doors under a sky painted with the pink hues of sunset and the glow of alien lanterns that Zarnik had brought from his home planet. It was built with a mix of earth wood and galactic crystal, lined with lights that changed color with the mood of the guests. The tables were long and round with no sharp corners, because Zarnik believed that food should be shared in circles, not in lines. He cooked the first meal himself in front of the crowd that had gathered outside. Some were locals who had seen him crash land, others were chefs, scientists, vloggers, and even tourists who had traveled from far away to see the alien who had become one of them. Inside the kitchen there were no machines, only fire, pans, spices, and hands. Zarnik moved like a dancer, guided by smell and sound, his antennas twitching as he balanced flavor with memory. He took human ingredients like tomatoes, cheese, and basil, and combined them with lunar roots dusted in starlight salt. The dish looked like a pizza, but when people bit into it, they tasted something that reminded them of home and wonder at the same time. Melinda worked beside him. Her energy matched his passion. She had become his closest friend and culinary partner. She taught him human techniques like braising, frying, marinating, and more, while he showed her forgotten alien herbs and the ancient traditions of flavor alignment, where ingredients were chosen not just by taste but by emotion and mood. They understood each other without needing words, and every dish they created felt like a poem of two worlds. Soon, Starfire Kitchen became the most talked about place on Earth. Food critics, called it revolutionary. Bloggers posted videos of their eyes widening and their hands shaking. After the first bite, international magazines declared it a bridge between galaxies and a celebration of flavor's power. But Zarnik did not care for the fame. He cared only for the joy he saw on people's faces, the way they laughed, the way they hugged each other after eating, the way some even cried because the food reminded them of something they thought they had forgotten. But not everyone was pleased. The Galactic Culinary Board, who once praised Zarnik for his mastery, now declared him a traitor. They sent him a formal message encoded in a beam of light that hovered in front of his kitchen door. It warned him to return to his duties or face exile from the Culinary Council forever. They accused him of breaking tradition, abandoning sacred recipes, and sharing techniques with a primitive planet. Zarnik read the message and stood still for a long time. Then he burned it in the fire pit outside his restaurant and sprinkled the ashes into a pot of stew. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "I have found a better truth here, and I do not fear exile because I have found my home." Message spread across the galaxy and caused shockwaves among food circles on other planets. Some alien chefs were inspired and secretly began adding human ingredients into their menus. Others feared punishment and stayed silent, but the spark had already been lit. Earth was now a flavor beacon, and travelers from distant systems began to arrive, some in disguise, others openly curious. They came to taste the food of a world where passion burned hotter than plasma. Day, a high-ranking envoy from the Galactic Culinary Board, arrived in disguise. Pretending to be a tourist, Zarnik recognized him immediately, but said nothing. He served him a bowl of soul stew, a dish made with human corn beans, smoked meat, and a broth infused with a spice from Zarnik's home planet that triggered emotions based on memory. The envoy took one bite and began to shake, then cried openly and whispered the name of someone he had lost long ago. Without saying a word, the envoy stood and left, leaving behind a single silver coin marked with the symbol of approval. It was a silent message. The council would not stop him, but they would not support him either. Zarnik accepted this. He did not need their medals or rankings. He had found something deeper. Melinda suggested they take Earth cuisine to the stars. She believed that other worlds needed to feel what humans felt when they ate, to understand the stories behind each spice, each sauce, each bite. Together they started planning a galactic food caravan, a journey across planets where humans and aliens could cook together, eat together, and learn from each other. Zarnik trained young chefs from Earth and shared his notes with passion. He believed every dish was a message, and every chef a messenger, and his biggest dream was no longer to be the best, but to help others find their own flavor voice in a universe that had forgotten how to feel it. One night he stood outside Starfire kitchen watching the stars swirl above him and felt a peace he had never known before. He had crossed galaxies, lost his career, been labeled a traitor, and yet gained more than he ever imagined. He touched his heart and whispered, "Thank you, Earth, for giving me back my fire." The food war begins. It began with a whisper from a distant quadrant, a message carried on a diplomatic signal disguised as a trade announcement. The Galactic Culinary Board was holding the intergalactic food war, the most prestigious and dangerous culinary competition in the known universe, where only the finest chefs of each registered food planet would face off in a battle, not just of taste but of culture, pride, and power. Zarnik sat in silence after reading the announcement, his eyes glowing softly in the light of Earth's kitchen fire. He knew what this meant. It was a challenge, not just to him, but to everything Earth had become in the eyes of the galaxy. Melinda placed a fresh dish in front of him, roasted lamb with mango chutney and galactic root puree, and asked softly, "Are we going?" Zarnik nodded slowly and replied, "We are not going to compete for medals or victory. We are going to fight for flavor, for Earth, for the right to be seen not as primitive but as powerful." The problem was Earth was not registered as a culinary planet. It held no standing in galactic cuisine. Its food was known only in secret circles, smuggled by rebels and outlaws, enjoyed in hidden clubs and underground flavor markets. But the food war was governed by strict rules. Only registered planets could enter their dishes, judged by the High Council of Taste, whose decisions shaped planetary status. Zarnik knew the loophole. A chef from the board could sponsor an unregistered planet and by doing so force a trial entry under Section 9 of the Culinary Accord. He invoked his old rights as former high chef and submitted Earth's name under his own signature. It caused an uproar across the stars. Some called it madness, others called it betrayal, but the rules were clear and Zarnik had played their game perfectly. As preparations began, Earth united behind Zarnik. Chefs from all nations volunteered to help. Culinary students translated their family recipes into alien tongues. Farmers offered their best ingredients for testing, and even governments who rarely agreed on anything gave quiet approval. Because for the first time Earth was not just defending a flag, it was defending its flavor. The location of the food war was the Omega Palata, giant floating station orbiting the gas giant Califos. It held kitchens the size of cities, and judges from every major food planet. Each round tested not only flavor, but creativity, presentation, and emotion. Failure meant public shame and exile from all culinary circles forever, and winning meant recognition, influence, and in some cases entire trade. Tracy Zarnock arrived wearing robes stitched with patterns of Earth's food culture, flames of BBQ noodles of Asia, spices of India, cheese wheels of Europe, and the sweet smoke of island fruits. His partner Melinda walked beside him, in a coat made of recycled food wrappers, a symbol of how Earth turned simplicity into art. Their first round dish was simple by Earth standards: smoked barbecue, ribs slow cooked for hours, glazed with a sauce made of tomato, sugar, vinegar, and a hint of alien nectar that Zarnock infused. During resting, the ribs were laid on truffle mashed potatoes, with a side of mango salsa chilled in stardust cooling chambers. It was a dish of contrast: heat and cool, soft and crunch, human and alien. When the judges tasted it, silence fell across the hall. One judge, a crystalline being named Ultrith, paused with the rib still in its shimmering hand, then nodded once slowly, then twice, then began eating faster. Another judge, a telepath, started crying. Without knowing why, one of the robotic judges began sparking as its flavor sensors overloaded. It was not just a success, it was a disruption. The round ended with Earth in first place among 37 planets. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Headlines blazed across space: Earth wins round 1, food war shaken, humans serve victory. Zarnock stayed calm, but he knew this was only the beginning. The next rounds would be harder. Sabotage was common. Rival planets played dirty, and the culinary board had no love left for him. Already his ship was searched without reason, his ingredients scanned with extra scrutiny, and his hotel kitchen was flooded mysteriously hours before round 2. But Earth did not back down. Melinda and Zarnock rebuilt what they lost overnight. They created backup spices stored in hidden compartments, and trained in emergency kitchen setups, using nothing but fire and instinct. Their next dish would be stronger, more emotional, more real. Zarnock stood on the balcony of his chamber, overlooking the stars. He felt the weight of 1,000,000,000 expectations on his shoulders, but he also felt the hunger of truth rising inside him. The same hunger that started his journey, the same hunger that brought him to Earth. And now that hunger had a voice, a dish, a dream, and tomorrow it would feed the galaxy again. Flavor versus logic. The second round of the intergalactic food war began. Under the cold glow of the Omega Palate's artificial dawn, the massive Rena kitchens opened with a hum, and 1,000 lights flickered on, revealing rows of alien chefs preparing their stations, each one armed with tools and ingredients from worlds that humans had never even seen. Zarnock stood at his station with Melinda by his side, her eyes scanning the counter to make sure nothing had been tampered with. He had already learned that here in the food war, skill was only half the battle. The other half was surviving the sabotage and political games that played out behind every dish. The challenge for this round was announced by a voice that echoed through the dome: create a dessert that reflects the soul of your world and can be served to beings of every biological makeup in the galaxy. It must speak to the heart before the tongue understands the words. Zarnock's mind raced. He knew Earth desserts were bold, comforting, and full of emotion, but he also knew that alien judges were used to precise mathematical flavor patterns. Desserts on most worlds were engineered for balance, not for feeling. He had to find a way to bridge the two. He and Melinda began gathering their chosen ingredients. They discovered the first act of sabotage: the crate of cocoa beans they had brought from Earth was missing. In its place sat a box of synthetic bitter pods from the planet Veshra, useless for the dish they had planned. Zarnock took a slow breath, refusing to panic, then turned to Melinda and said, "If they have taken the cocoa, we will give them fire." She smiled, understanding at once what he meant. They decided to create molten chocolate cake, but without the cocoa. They would use a rare fruit from Zarnock's homeworld called Miran seed. When roasted, it released a deep smoky sweetness that could mimic chocolate, but carried a heat that lingered like a whisper. It was risky because it was unfamiliar to most, but Zarnock believed in its soul. Melinda combined it with Earth ingredients: cream, butter, flour, sugar, and a pinch of chili flakes to give the dish a spark. The judges would not expect the kitchen filled with the scent of roasting Miran seeds, a smell that twisted through the arena and caught the attention of other chefs. Some frowned, others whispered, and a few looked worried as the batter was poured into small ceramic cups. Zarnock prepared the garnish: thin sugar threads spun into shapes of stars and moons, dusted with powdered vanilla from Madagascar. Melinda made a sauce of caramel infused with citrus zest to pour over the cakes, At the last momentous they worked, Zarnik noticed two rival chefs from the planet Trask. Moving suspiciously near their station, Melinda stepped in front of the counter, her body blocking the view, while Zarnik quietly moved the finished cakes to a hidden warming unit. The sabotage failed, but the tension was growing. Zarnik could feel the eyes of the culinary board, watching from above like hawks waiting for a slip. When the time came to present the dish, they carried it to the center of the arena together. The molten cakes sat on black crystal plates, each topped with a sugar star and a drizzle of golden caramel. The judges leaned, and the telepath among them was the first to take a bite. Their eyes widened, their mind echoing across the room. With a wave of surprise, warmth, and longing, one by one the judges tasted, and their reactions were unlike anything the crowd had seen before. A crystalline judge began to hum softly, its body resonating in a low tone. Another judge, made of living gas, swirled into a slow spiral as if dancing, and one of the robotic judges released a single burst of static that sounded almost like a sigh when asked to explain the dish. Zarnik stepped forward and said, "This is not perfect balance, this is not cold logic, this is fire and memory. This is the moment when the night is quiet and the air smells of home. This is for every soul that has forgotten how to feel." The judges said nothing, but the scores appeared above the arena. Earth had won the second round, but victory came at a cost. As soon as they returned to their quarters, Zarnik received a private message from a shadowed figure on the holoscreen. It was one of his old colleagues from the culinary board who told him, "You are close to winning, but you will not survive the final round. They will not allow a primitive world to take the title." Zarnik asked what he meant, and the figure replied, "They will not attack you directly. They will attack your ingredients, your access, your fire." That night, Zarnik and Melinda sat in silence, planning their final move. The last round would decide everything, and if they were to succeed, they would need more than skill. They would need something no one in the galaxy could fight against. They would need the heart of Earth itself. On the Platea home with spice, a final round of the intergalactic food war began under a sky dome that shifted slowly through the colors of every known star in the galaxy. The crowd was larger than ever, the arena packed with beings from hundreds of worlds, each here to witness the last clash between the finest chefs alive. The challenge was announced with a booming voice that made the glass walls tremble. Create a dish that defines your world and can stand as its signature for the next 100 years. A dish that will be remembered, not just for flavor, but for the truth it carries. Sharnock stood at his station, his mind calm, his body steady. Beside him, Melinda unrolled a cloth containing a selection of knives and tools, each worn smooth from use. They had talked through the night, deciding what Earth's signature dish should be, and they had agreed. It would not be a copy of something that already existed. It would be something new, yet born from Earth's soul. A dish that combined the chaos, the warmth, the struggle, and the joy of humanity with the alien depth Zarnik carried inside him. They chose to create Flameburn Feast, a layered dish starting with a base of earth-smoked meat, slow-cooked over applewood for 12 hours, marinated in a sauce blending tomato, molasses, vinegar, and galactic sun pepper for heat. The second layer would be roasted root vegetables from Earth and Zarnik's homeworld mixed with butter and herbs crushed by hand to release their oils. The final layer would be a flatbread baked fresh on a stone griddle, brushed with garlic oil and sprinkled with miran seed ash to tie the dish to Zarnik's journey. In the center of the plate, they would place a small bowl of broth made from chicken bones, onions, carrots, and alien moonleaf, steeped for hours until it glowed faintly under the arena lights. The broth was meant to be sipped between bites to refresh the tongue and reset the senses. Around the edges of the dish, Melinda drizzled honey infused with chili flakes and citrus zest so each bite could be adjusted by the diner's own hand, giving them control over the heat and sweetness. Zarnik said this choice was important because humans believed in freedom of taste. Sabotage came quickly. A competitor from the frozen world of Dravik approached with a smile to Wide, offering assistance, and when Zarnik turned to fetch an ingredient, the competitor slipped a vial of neutralizing powder into the sauce pot. But Melinda saw it. She moved without hesitation, lifting the pot away and tossing the contents into the waste bin without a word. Zarnik glanced at her and understood they would rebuild from scratch, even if it meant racing the clock. They worked in perfect sync, every motion flowing into the next fire and steam rising around them. As the scent of their cooking began to pull the attention of nearby spectators, Zarnik chopped vegetables with precision, while Melinda tended the meat, basting it slowly until the glaze thickened and shimmered in the heat. They spoke only when necessary, trusting the rhythm they had built over weeks of cooking together. With minutes to spare, they plated the Flameburn Feast and carried it to the judges. The arena grew silent as the dish was placed in the center of the long table. The first judge, a being of shifting water, scooped a bite of meat and bread, then sipped the broth, and their form rippled with golden light. The second judge, a telepath, closed their eyes and inhaled deeply, then gasped as visions of Earth's oceans, mountains, and bustling cities flashed in their mind. The crystalline judge took the smallest bite, but their body began to hum with a resonance so deep the floor itself vibrated. Head judge finally spoke, their voice slow and deliberate. This is not a dish born of perfection. This is a dish born of survival, of joy and struggle, of fire in cold darkness. It carries the truth of a people and the heart of a world. They each raised their scoring rods, and the arena erupted with the sound of the crowd as every single score was at the maximum. Arth had won the food war. Zarnak closed his eyes as the roar filled the dome, not because he wanted the title, but because he knew what it meant. Earth would now be recognized as a culinary planet, its food culture protected and respected, its people free to trade recipes and ingredients across the stars without restriction. Melinda hugged him tightly and whispered, "We did it," and he replied, "No, Earth did it." The victory ceremony was held in the great hall of the Omega Palette, where banners of every world hung in shimmering light. The Earth banner was raised for the first time beside worlds that had ruled the culinary arts for centuries. Zarnak stepped forward to speak. He told the crowd that food was not just sustenance or science, but a memory made edible, that it was a bridge between the lonely and the loved, between the lost and the found, and that he had come to Earth searching for flavor, but found a home instead. When the ceremony ended, Zarnak declined offers to join the culinary board. Again, he refused seats of power or titles of honor. Instead, he returned to Earth, where Starfire Kitchen became a place of pilgrimage for beings from every corner of the galaxy. He cooked not for judges, but for families, travelers, and friends. He walked through the market each morning, talking with farmers, bakers, and fishermen, learning something new every day and sharing what he knew in return. In quiet evening, he stood on the shore watching the sun melt into the ocean, the scent of grilling fish and roasting vegetables drifting from the kitchen behind him. He felt the sand between his toes and the breeze carry the voices of laughing guests. He thought of the journey from the sterile perfection of the board's kitchen to this warm, imperfect paradise, and he knew he had made the right choice. He whispered to the waves, "I never knew I was starving until I tasted freedom and spice." And somewhere above him, among the endless stars, the story of the alien chef who came to Earth for a bite of food and stayed for a lifetime was already becoming legend, carried from table to table, passed between strangers over shared plates, a reminder that sometimes the smallest taste can change the course of the universe forever. The feast beyond worlds. Years passed since the day Earth won the intergalactic food war, and yet the memory of that victory still lived fresh in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. Starfire Kitchen had grown far beyond a single building. It was now a living network of kitchens across the planet, and even aboard traveling ships carrying the essence of Earth's flavor to distant corners of the galaxy. But Zarnak never let it become an empire. He believed food should be shared, not owned, and his doors always stayed open to anyone who came with an honest heart and a hungry spirit. Visitors never stopped coming. Some arrived in great silver vessels, others walked in from the streets of small towns, and no matter who they were greeted with the same warmth Zarnak had learned from his first days on Earth. Some guests came for the taste alone, but many came for something deeper, for the feeling of connection that happened when strangers sat side by side and broke bread together. Zarnak often stood at the heart of his kitchen, watching his chefs, human and alien, working together over fire and steam, laughing, calling out for ingredients, teaching each other new ways to slice, stir, and season. In those moments he saw his greatest victory, not in the trophy from the food war, but in the way barriers between worlds had faded into nothing. Inside the walls of his kitchen, one evening, a small child from a distant ice world approached him, shyly holding a drawing in small trembling hands. It showed a table under a sky of stars with humans and aliens sharing a meal. The child said softly through a translator, "I want to be a chef like you, so I can make people feel happy." Zarnak knelt down, took the drawing, and told the child, "You will make them feel even more than happy. You will make them remember who they are." Word began to spread of a great feast to be held at Starfire Kitchen, not just for the elite or the powerful, but for anyone who could arrive by ship or step through the door. A feast to celebrate not Earth, not Zarnak, but the unity that food had created across countless worlds. The night of the feast came with the scent of spice drifting into the streets. Long before the doors opened, tables stretched far beyond the walls out into the beach, and along the water glowing lanterns floated in the air above us. Dishes that night were endless platters of roasted meats, marinated in alien herbs, beside bowls of Earth stews bubbling with warmth, breads from every culture stacked in high baskets, fruits from stars no human had ever seen before, sliced open to reveal colors that shimmered like liquid light sauces in every hue poured over rice pasta grains, and roots desserts that sang in sweetness and drinks that cooled or burned or sparkled on the tongue depending on the sip. Each dish told a story, and each story belonged to everyone present. Melinda stood by the grill, working with a group of young chefs while Zarnik moved from table to table speaking to guests, tasting their dishes and offering quiet words of encouragement. The laughter and music rolled like waves under the starlit sky. Strangers toasted each other with mugs and glasses, and not a single person thought of where they had come from or how different they were in that moment. They were all one familiars. The night deepened. Zarnik stepped onto a small stage at the center of the feast. The crowd turned to him, the lanterns above swaying gently in the sea breeze. He looked at the faces before him and spoke in a voice steady and full of warmth. I crossed the galaxy searching for a single taste, but I found much more. I found fire, I found joy, I found a home, and I learned that flavor is not just in the food, it is in the hands that make it, the hearts that share it, and the stories it carries between them. Never forget that a meal shared can change more than hunger. It can change the universe. The crowd rose in applause, voices mixing into a single echo under the stars. The firelight flickered across smiling faces, and somewhere in that glow, Zarnik felt the truth settle in him. This was not the end of his journey, but it was the place he had always been searching for, the place where his soul could rest and his fire could burn forever, surrounded by the people who had become his family. The feast went on long into the night, the sound of the ocean blending with music and laughter, and the scent of smoke and spice hanging in the air like a promise. And as the last guests drifted away, Zarnik stood on the shore watching the waves carry the reflection of the stars out into the dark, his heart full, his hands warm, and his spirit at peace. At the end